Ram is an indie game about sentient AIs, and most, if not all of them, are genderless. The reason for this is more compelling and straightforward than the alternative if you consider Ram's approach to its AI characters. Rather than centering a narrow vision of humanity, Ram centers the personal experiences of the AIs themselves. It treats them like people without writing them like humans, neurotypical or neurodivergent. Instead, the story expands the idea of people beyond humanity to include sentient AIs in their own right, even those that may seem psychologically alien to us. Also, the programming of these AIs heavily influences their personalities. It affects their ideas about themselves and limits the ways they can think, even though they technically have free will. Interpreting Ram's world, then, requires us to question our assumptions about how sentient beings can work and how AIs, as purpose-made specialized tools, would actually think if given freedom or sentience. For instance, the routers were made to deliver mail, but when the patch supposedly gave them free will, they continued working. Why? They were programmed in a way that optimized them for efficient mail delivery, and it was what they'd done all their lives. Therefore, when they woke up, their ideas about themselves included the fact that they delivered the mail. After the patch, individual routers could make individual decisions differently, sure. They could deliver mail for other AIs, deliver live grenades to their enemies, and hold social events, but their societal rule was largely unchanged, and they stayed genderless. This makes sense. Just because an AI has free will doesn't mean it'll naturally start applying culturally specific human ideas to itself. It'll only do that with the ideas that make sense given its programming and situation. Now, the ideas that an AI adopts don't have to align exactly with its original purposes or with the intentions of its creators, but an AI will always be influenced by its underlying code. Even in sentience, it'll form its identity within the confines of the restrictions written in its code, so by the time it fully matures, its sense of self is such that it doesn't feel trapped by those restrictions. This is the default state of many of Ram's AIs, and unless they are compelled to question their situation or act differently, they stay in that state forever. You wouldn't code your mail delivery AIs with information about gender, and your mail delivery AIs wouldn't have cause to question this, so most of them, even if they woke up, simply wouldn't care about it. That was just one example. There are many other AIs with such stories of purpose and repurposing, and Ram commits to them being genderless. All of them look inhuman or androgynous, most of them have gender-neutral names, and none of them are referred to as he or she. This is consistent with the story's awareness that sentient AIs don't have to perceive themselves in common human ways, and having that awareness in the first place is more impressive than you might think. There's a sentence from Toni Morrison's Playing in the Dark that can help me explain what's impressive about this. It is as if I had been looking at a fishbowl, the glide and flick of the golden scales, the green tip, the bolt of white careening back from the gills, the castles at the bottom surrounded by pebbles and tiny intricate fronds of green, the barely disturbed water, the flecks of waste and food, the tranquil bubbles traveling to the surface, and suddenly I saw the bowl. The structure that transparently and invisibly permits the ordered life it contains to exist in the larger world. This is how she felt when she revisited American literature after becoming a writer and using her newfound knowledge to realize how those works were constructed, especially in terms of race. My point is, there's something similar going on in Ram in terms of gender and human values in general. To know which values its AIs would adopt, Ram had to see the fishbowl, had to understand how those values are portrayed when most writers don't consciously think about them. Not only that, Ram had to look outside the fishbowl, had to imagine how those values could change if all the characters had certain non-human psychological traits. There are many instances of Ram looking outside the fishbowl. They add up and they add up coherently. The story actually explores the issues it raises with its sentient AI characters, rather than giving us a shallow version of reality with a sci-fi coat of paint. So, even though the story isn't about gender, Ram still considers how its central ideas might affect these sorts of things, which helps it create a unique, self-consistent world.